Nvidia's H100 is pretty much the poster child when taking a closer look at AI chips. The H100 is in huge demand right now thanks to all these AI workloads that are coming out of nowhere, right? With this kind of huge demand in the AI space. And Nvidia has done such a great job as creating some form of moat for its H100 chips and for all its AI chips, from hardware to software to frameworks, and the list goes on and on. But what happens when the market wants optionality and tries to help out the competition? In today's episode, what I want to take a closer look at is how AMD is benefiting from the overall lack of competition in this space, and how companies all over the world are helping AMD kind of improve their solutions here in the AI space. Let's take a closer look in today's episode. So, if you guys are familiar with this channel, you guys know I'm a huge semiconductor investor, and Nvidia and AMD are two of my biggest positions. Nvidia is number one, and AMD is number two. And right now, I personally believe that Nvidia will remain to hold the crown when it comes to AI chips, but AMD is definitely a second player here that I believe the market sometimes underlooks, right, or underestimates. And let's kind of start off with the problem right now. So, right now, there is this huge demand for AI GPUs. And the only one that's really creating any form of solution in this space is Nvidia with their A100 and their H100. The main strength that that Nvidia has is they have created not only the hardware but also the software like CUDA to kind of improve the kind of metrics and kind of the solutions that this hardware provides. They also have a lot of kind of great networking solutions that also help with NVIDIA's overall platform. So NVIDIA has created kind of this infrastructure to help increase its AI workloads, not just the GPU. But unfortunately, thanks to this huge demand and the lack of supply, there is right now many companies out there that want to get their hands on AI accelerators, but unfortunately, NVIDIA's GPUs are getting more expensive due to supply and demand, and also there is a shortage just because of the huge demand happening right now. So obviously, just like anything else, when there is a problem here in the human race, we try to find a solution. And right now, that solution is to try to help out its competitor or increase the optionality. I mean, I don't think the market is trying to help AMD in forms of improving its stock, but AMD is the only one that is close to NVIDIA right now. So they're trying to help out AMD so there is more optionality, right? If there's more optionality, there's probably going to be better pricing options. There's also going to be more inventory options as well, which can overall help push this growth in AI at the moment. And if you have been following this channel, we've kind of heard about this problem numerous months ago. For example, Meta AI. This is one of the founders of PyTorch, which is a huge software that's used for machine learning. They kind of, in October 3rd, they kind of mentioned that right now it's very difficult for, let's say, if I was a data scientist or some form of scientist that's working on machine learning, to design one system or to design some software on NVIDIA's GPUs and then kind of switch them over to an AMD GPU, right? Once I pick one GPU, it becomes a sticky business within itself. I won't be able to switch between GPUs. And that's normally not the case with most hardware. With most hardware, they tend to run really well in different softwares. So this alone was creating kind of this, hey, if I'm going with NVIDIA, I have to stick with NVIDIA. And this kind of created a lack of flexibility, and it also makes it difficult to iterate and maintain the code that makes up various solutions in the space, right? So obviously Meta AI and a lot of other companies were trying to work on ways to kind of create some form of backend where it might not be too difficult, where maybe I'm working on an NVIDIA GPU, but if I want to work on an AMD GPU, it would be very easy to transfer over and not create kind of all these crazy software solutions. So this brings me into this research paper that came out, I want to say about a week ago, on June 30th, so not even about 4 days ago. And it was training large language models with AMD's MI250 GPUs and Mosaic ML. So in this research paper, we're actually going to see how AMD's MI250, thanks to companies kind of creating these solutions in the backend, are now making it possible where you can transfer from an NVIDIA GPU to an AMD GPU with very little changes. So we did mention with the release of PyTorch 2.0, like I mentioned, PyTorch 2.0 is kind of a player or stable in the machine learning software environment. And ROCm 5.4, for those not familiar with ROCm, this is AMD's software solution for their data center GPUs. They are excited to announce that large language model training works out of the box on AMD data center GPUs with zero code changes and at a high performance. So this is pretty interesting, right? Where back then there was this problem where if you wanted to use an AMD GPU, there wasn't too many software solutions out there. And if you wanted to kind of change between an Nvidia GPU and an AMD GPU, you had to do a lot of software changes. But now we can see here for this kind of training of large language models, there was zero code changes and still saw high performance. And I want to take a closer look at this. I want to say today's episode might be a little bit more techy than normal, but I do believe it's very important for investors to kind of understand what's happening here in the back end. Mosaic, I'm pretty sure I'm butchering it, believes that the competitive market for machine learning training hardware is critical to reducing prices for their customers, and their requirements for new hardware is simple: have speed and cost, real workloads, and developer experiences. So pretty much the market is saying, hey, look, NVIDIA is awesome. Obviously, they have great GPUs, but it's pretty expensive. We need more optionality because obviously with more optionality, things can get cheaper. So they did this kind of training with large language model foundry, and they did a AMD MI250 versus NVIDIA's A100.
I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for their subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
Remember, NVIDIA's A100 is their previous generation. Also remember, the MI250 is also AMD's current generation. The MI300 hasn't come out, so it's unfair for me to say that's their previous generations, but in about 6 to 7 months from now, the AMD MI250 is going to be AMD's previous generation. They also did some performance, and they mentioned that the performance was competitive with their existing A100. In theory, the MI250 was within 80% of the A100 40 gigabytes memory and within 73% of the A100 80 gigabyte. It is important to understand that the MI250, I believe, has 120. It tends to have a little bit more memory. I know we'll see it in a bit, but it is. First, I want to say it's pretty impressive that the A100, even with all these improvements, right, the A100 is still ahead by a nice amount, right? And also, even their smaller memory size, right? We saw the A100 with the 40 gigabyte, and we also saw the A100 with the 80 gigabyte. But they do expect this gap will close as AMD's software improves. I do want to say AMD's NVIDIA software will also improve and maybe kind of increase the gap a little bit more. But today's results, or another important thing to mention though, is today's results were on a single node. So this is just 4 MI250 GPUs, but they're working with hyperscalers to validate larger AMD GPU clusters. That's what's very important for machine learning and for large language models as well. So right now in this task, it's very important that they were only able to talk or only tested with a single node. So that's 4 times the MI250s. What's happening right now in the data center market, especially with artificial intelligence, is there's multiple nodes, but all these nodes need to talk with each other. And that's where we're seeing kind of all these hypercomputers with like thousands and thousands and thousands of GPUs. And those thousands of GPUs tend to be just hundreds and hundreds of single nodes that talk to each other. So multiple single nodes talk to each other to kind of work with a lot of these AI workloads. So the results we're only able to do with one single node. Obviously, these can kind of vary if maybe later on we start to see this kind of being on a GPU cluster. We also know that unfortunately the MI250 comes in blades, which are usually 4 GPUs, where the A100 comes in systems with its 8 GPUs. So NVIDIA seems to do better at communicating within its own hardware, and it's able to do up to 8 GPUs in a single node, where the AMD platform tends to only do 4. So I do believe that kind of showcased a little bit of maybe technology strength there. Maybe that might change over time. Oh, here I was talking about the memory. So overall, the MI250 has a slight edge in flops per second. high bandwidth memory and memory bandwidth, but the MI250 GPUs usually come packed in smaller systems, just like I was mentioning, which means to reach a given compute target, you need to buy twice the number of AMD systems than NVIDIA systems. This is actually very true, right? You're going to need to buy, NVIDIA's 8 GPUs can work with one CPU. If you want 8 GPUs working with the MI250, you actually need to have two systems. So you need to have maybe two CPUs, you need to have two motherboards, and that can overall increase the price. Earlier today, I was mentioning how one of the biggest strengths that Nvidia has is they created this kind of moat within themselves where they have networking side and they have a lot of software solutions. So they do mention that good software has been the Achilles heel for most machine learning training chip companies. Nvidia has done the CUDA, which is kind of helps with a lot of the matrix multiplication and all the math that needs to happen for AI and machine learning workloads. But unfortunately for software developers, CUDA is a closed source and only runs on Nvidia GPUs. That's great for investors, right? Because it kind of gives an incentive to go out there and buy Nvidia GPUs. But that closed source tends to be bad for developers. They also have the NCCL, which is a communication library for high performance cross GPU operations. And again, NVIDIA that only runs NCCL only runs on NVIDIA GPUs. On top of that, there is a huge layer networking infrastructure that NVIDIA hardware attracts for distributed multi-GPU and multi-node workloads. And that's what I was talking about earlier before, right? Where this test right now has only been done where AMD is a single node. But to kind of perform a lot of these serious machine learning workloads, they're all distributed. So it's a multi-node workload where you're having thousands and thousands of GPUs working together and talking to each other. And NVIDIA has done such a great job at doing that. First, they have the NVLink and the NVSwitch, which is a high bandwidth interconnect within the node. But then outside of the node, they have the infinite band or RDMA, which is a high bandwidth interconnect across multiple nodes. So infinite band has lower latency, but tends to be more expensive. So overall, we can see that NVIDIA has definitely created a solution for not just single node connection, but also multi-node communication. And AMD, luckily, has been developing its own software and networking infrastructure. They have ROCm, which I just kind of talked about, which replaces CUDA. They have RCCL, which replaces NCCL. They have the Infinite Fabric, which replaces the NV switch. And they have Infinite Band or ROCE, which are very similar, supported across nodes. So Infinite Band is not an NVIDIA product. That is a very general product. So obviously that works a little bit with AMD as well. So they do mention that they tested out a few projects and that the benefit of this approach is that the existing PyTorch code requires no changes when switching from NVIDIA to AMD. So overall, we can see that this is a huge boost for AMD. And again, it's a huge pushback for NVIDIA, especially as NVIDIA, one of their biggest bullish thesis is that this company has created this moat with software. But it does seem like the market is getting a little bit tired. And for that reason, they are helping AMD a little bit kind of create more solutions and create more assistance in kind of validating AMD's accelerator. So I think I have a few more slides to kind of talk about, but I just want to see what's next here. And they do mention that later on they want to test more on a larger cluster, a multi-node, to see how AMD's platform performs, not just on a single node communication, but also on a multi-node communication. They're also looking forward to comparing AMD's MI300X versus the H100, but obviously the MI300 is not coming out till late this year, while the MI300 has been in the market came out last year and is really starting to hit the market right now. The other thing that they are mentioning is they are planning to provide inference benchmarks as well as other workloads, for example, the fusion models on both NVIDIA and AMD systems in future blog posts. So remember, this was only meant for training, and training is only a portion of the AI workloads. There's a lot. There's diffusion. There's also, we saw inference. So right now, I do believe this is just a great direction of AMD, and it obviously can push a lot more demand on their data center solutions, which will obviously be good for their stock price. At the end of the day, I do believe Nvidia will continue to hold the crown here, and I really am not too worried about Nvidia in forms of stock price performance. I do believe they still will continue to have demand, and Nvidia is a company that always focuses on developing new technologies. So I believe seeing something like this pushes them to even be a little bit more aggressive in their research and development and providing better products, at least for the data center side. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Take care, have a good day, and see you next time.